Rebekah Farmer had been dealing with digestive issues since she was 9 years old. But at the age of 26 in May 2019, at 5'6", she weighed just 69 pounds, had been diagnosed with 10 autoimmune diseases, and the doctors told her she probably wouldn't live past 30. Join me as I talk to Rebekah about the change she made to her diet so that she has now gained 70 pounds more, is lifting weights, and is helping other people change their health as well. You're going to want to check this out. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Hunger Hunt Feast. With me is Rebekah Farmer, health and life coach. Welcome, Rebekah.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I heard a little bit of your story, and it was really, it really grabbed my attention because it's really, I think, pretty unique. And then how you recovered, how you healed yourself really through that is also unconventional, let's just say. But I thought it was be something to share with the listeners because there's a lot of people who struggle with maybe just one of the things that you dealt with. And I'd love for people to hear that there is, hope, and a way to come through that, come from that. They don't feel so locked in many times to those conditions where it just feels like conventional medicine has not been able to help them, or their answers are not desirable. And you found a way to do that, holistically. So,
Yeah.
so let's get into it. Let's share your story. Let's start there. Let's start with what your struggle was.
So I have been detected of malnourishment since a very young age. In 6th grade, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis. In 7th grade, I ran into a host of severe mood disorders, ADHD, narcolepsy, anxiety, insomnia, depression, major OCD. These were real problems. It ruled me. This OCD, it was like I was a slave. So I was put on Adderall, clonazepam, and Ambien. And at the time, they said, yes, you can take these long term. They're not addictive. So took those for 13 years. I continued to get worse. Developed really severe chronic pain. And I was diagnosed with degenerative disc and costochondritis, which is inflammation of the chest tissue. And I finally got to the point where I was just totally shot. It was right after my wisdom tooth removal surgery, and I was bedbound. I was having crippling suffocation and anxiety attacks. I was calling my parents to come over to massage me because otherwise I felt I was going to suffocate. I would end up in the ER. And so it was at that time that I decided I have to get to the root of these problems. And so I got off of my medications, which was very hard. And I took upon a stricter version of the ketogenic diet to do that, which was helpful. I had already been keto since I was young. I have familial relations who are very versed in keto, and so I understood it. I've never eaten high sugar or grain or anything like that, really. So I was able to get off of my medications, but I was still just totally burnt out. And that's when I started working with functional medicine doctors, and they uncovered all of these autoimmune issues that I had never heard of. I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, and many other diagnoses that are uncurable. And that was really, really scary. And even my functional medicine doctors were sort of like, we don't know what else to say. I was a mess. Chronic Epstein Barr virus, Hashimotos, hypothyroid, Addison's disease, fibromyalgia, central sensitization syndrome.
Wow.
I was a wreck. I later on developed ulcerative colitis, true celiac, gastroparesis, diverticulitis. All of those are very painful digestive issues. It makes it hard to eat. And then on top of all of that, I somewhere along the line developed a chronic C-diff infection. And that sapped me of all of my nutrients. I was losing rapid amounts of weight. At one point, I was eating 6,000 calories a day. Um,
Wow.
I was eating keto because it was the only thing that gave me some energy. And I was bedbound for a long time. So I wasn't ready to give up keto. And a lot of people were saying, well, you're eating keto, that's why you're losing weight. But I was eating plenty. So finally, over a year later, I'm finally tested for C-diff and it comes back positive. I went through 13 rounds of antibiotics. I was
Mm.
resistant to all of them. So then I was approved for a fecal transplant,
Mm.
still had the C. diff, got a second fecal transplant, and it went away for 2 months, and then it came back. Got a third fecal transplant and still tested positive for it.
Wow.
It was at this point last year in May of 2019 that I was 69 pounds at my last recorded weight. And they were telling me in the emergency room that I needed to remove my colon and be hooked up to a feeding tube. I couldn't even eat without involuntarily throwing up. The ulcerative colitis was majorly flaring up, gastroparesis. I was needing glucagon shots constantly because I was dealing with hypoglycemia. I was all over the place. And it was at that time that I told the dietitian, you've got to let me try this all meat diet because I had heard of it
Mm.
and I never gave it a fair chance. I had tried doing just beef, salt, and water multiple times, and I felt worse each time. And so she allowed me to do that. And I just ordered all of the meat, hard boiled eggs, and butter. They sent it up to my room, and I was hoarding that stuff in my room.
Mm.
And my blood sugars immediately stabilized. No more glucagon shots
This is in the hospital?
in the ER. Yep.
Wow.
Yes. And the doctor didn't even know about it. The dietitian actually went behind the doctor's back because I shared her my entire story. I was like, I've tried everything. So she really helped me out and she hooked me up. I was in direct contact with the chef in the kitchen
Mm.
and I was literally hoarding this stuff because I was being held in isolation. So I had some privacy. And I was just plowing down eggs and meat and the ulcerative colitis stopped. No more involuntary throwing up.
Mm.
Blood sugar stabilized, and I was able to put on 4 pounds in a week.
Oh, wow.
And then a week later, I see the doctor again, and she's like, "You're to the point where you're so stable that we can't hold you here anymore." And so the dietitian had told her, and she said, "Go home and do your weird all meat diet." And that's what I did, and I have never looked back. So since then, I have gained 65 healthy pounds. I
Wow.
am thriving more than I ever have in my entire life. Mood disorders, like I never had them. Um, and I test negative for every single diagnosis. I mean, Hashimoto's hypothyroid that's something that typically,
Right.
at least I was told that it's always with you. Many of these things are supposedly lifelong sentences. I was told that I wouldn't live past 30 years old or that I shouldn't expect to
Mm.
because of crest scleroderma. And it was very rapid in my body. It was developing scar tissue around my lungs. It can wrap itself around your internal organs and seriously kill you. All of that was not only mitigated and halted, but it has reversed. And
Wow.
I'm a new person. And God has delivered me from more than I could have ever imagined.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Wow. So I don't even know where to begin. That's
You should say.
that's amazing. So and I think I've seen pictures of you on Instagram. You're lifting weights, you're
Yeah,
exercising regularly now, which I'm sure that before that was impossible. I mean,
right. Yeah. It
you're
was hard to
wasting
hold
weight.
my own head up.
Yeah, right. You
Yeah.
couldn't even get verticals, right? So, or keep food down. So, and let me, you're, not to get too technical, but with you're what? How tall are you?
5'6".
5'6" at 70 pounds. A year and a half ago.
Yep.
Uh, That's, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they were probably thinking you were going to die. Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And you're how old right
I'm
now?
28.
28. Okay. Wow. Um, mm. So do you think it was the effect of the elimination diet that essentially that carnivore is? I mean, yes, there's a lot of nutrients. There's necessary nutrients and amazing nutrient density in eggs
Yes.
and liver and carnivorous, food. But you were probably getting those anyway. You're probably getting those nutrients from whatever you were doing to recover. You were eating those foods, but you basically eliminated everything else. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct. So
Okay.
I was keto before,
Hmm.
and I will say I was not meat heavy keto.
Okay.
I I was eating very low amounts of protein and high amounts of fat because I was
Okay.
having seizures at one point, and the high fat diet really helped my mood.
Sure.
And I was at one point, I didn't tolerate more than 30 grams of protein per day. So
Mm.
that alone can cause issues for anyone. Um, so
Tolerate with
I,
digestion primarily.
yeah, totally,
Okay. Yeah.
totally. My gut has been wrecked from all of the benzodiazepines and antibiotics.
Right.
I was not absorbing anything.
Hmm.
And so I believe increasing meat definitely was helpful,
Hmm.
but the removal of anti-nutrients found in vegetation,
Mm.
and black pepper and turmeric, which I was using regularly, removing
Uh,
those, it provided so much relief. And then the addition of, I guess by doing that, it allowed the animal proteins and animal fats to go to work finally. They
mm.
were really holding me back. I believe that the anti-nutrients were the cause for the ulcerative colitis, gastroparesis. Essentially, it was upsetting my central nervous system. And anything that's doing that, when you have autoimmune disease, it can cause a flare up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was simply the removal of anti-nutrients and then definitely getting those bioavailable nutrients found in meat. I consider eating meat to be better than being hooked up to a feeding tube. Um,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, in
For
every
sure.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So the like the anti-nutrients like the herbs and even the seasonings you're talking about cause some level of inflammation, which sent out signals that inflamed your autoimmune, which you
Right.
had
Right.
autoimmune markers for sounds like everything. I mean, you
A
basically,
lot.
yeah, you had a lot of autoimmune. I mean, sometimes it's like one or two things will set off an autoimmune response in one system. You had it
Right.
going off in multiple
Systemic.
systems. Yeah, systemic,
Yeah,
complete systemic,
totally.
head to
I
toe.
was I was honestly concerned that I had neuro Lyme. A couple of my doctors thought that I might have had neuro Lyme. I felt hopeless. I was also diagnosed with lupus
Mm.
right near the end. That's gone. Everything
Wow.
has just disappeared and my labs are textbook perfect. And I might correct you in saying I don't think herbs ever caused an issue. I still use herbs. I think that they
Okay.
have amazing beneficial properties,
Okay.
and they don't contain anti-nutrients that I know of.
Okay.
It
Sorry, I
was
was referring to the
mainly,
turmeric, and that's not really, I
oh,
guess,
right,
that's a
spice.
spice. That's a
Yeah, close
spice,
enough.
which is
Yeah.
different. You're correct. You're right. Sorry about
Um,
that. But yeah, which is known to cause, I mean, yeah, the benefits of turmeric is a slight amount of inflammation, which causes a response
right,
with that
right,
people, but in your system, it was too much. Like
right.
you're sensitive to anything that causes a slight amount of inflammation, whereas one person, it may not affect them, but your system was like, nope, sorry, we're not.
All systems. And I will say I was also in a really bad relationship. I ended up in a relationship with someone it was domestic abuse. And
Mm,
I almost lived in a women's shelter. Being in that environment, I was already stuck in fight or flight mode, but
right.
that just made it all the worse. And I really do believe that environment and lifestyle matter. They matter just as much as nutrition. Sometimes you can get everything right with nutrition, but that's what's holding you back. If you're not sleeping, if you're not in a supported place, it does manifest physiologically.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a factor. With cortisol levels are certainly affected by sleep and external stressors and emotions, which can affect blood sugar and a number of other. Even if you have
Digestion.
an autoimmune system, it could set that off as well. Um,
Yeah.
so your Lyme is cleared.
Yes.
Wow,
Yep.
that's pretty.
Yep.
That's very unusual as well. A lot of people, they might get it to calm down, but they it's always, some degree simmering in the background,
Exactly.
and they then it would get a flare up when, who knows, they
Yeah.
may not know why. But how long now, that was a year and a half ago that you were at 65 pounds. How long have you been on this carnivore diet now?
Since, well, strictly since May of 2019. Like I
Oh,
mentioned, I had
okay.
tried it. I
Okay.
had tried it, yeah, I started in the hospital.
Mm,
But I had tried it before then. I wanted it to work. And I heard about it multiple times, but I was being too dogmatic. I was spending time in these forums and Reddit and groups on Facebook, and everyone's saying, just eat beef, salt, and water. And I tried that and I was miserable. I was miserable. It
okay.
didn't work for me. It felt restrictive, especially for someone that's already 69 pounds. It's like, I can't be restricted. I cannot afford that. So I decided to think for myself.
Mm,
I have knowledge, and I just put my critical thinking to use and thought about, okay, so what do I need? I need to balance my omega-3 to 6 fats, obviously keep fat to protein ratio in mind, but I
mm,
also needed to eat at a surplus to gain weight. So I allowed myself to have dairy. I
mm,
made things hyper palatable. I allowed myself to use stevia, which is a ketogenic sweetener. And a lot of people would say, no, don't touch that. And I'm not saying that those things are not issues for a lot of people,
mhm.
but I was at the point where I needed to rig my brain to eat at a surplus. And I mean, I couldn't even eat steak for like 5 months. It was too filling, it was too satiating.
Mm,
So, for someone that desperately needs to put on weight, I had to do something. So I did those things and I made it sustainable. I got
okay.
creative. I started making fish skins in the air fryer, making chips out of those. I started using chicken feet and pig ears, and I
Oh,
just became this savage create, I'll eat
gotcha.
anything as long as it's in the animal kingdom. And that gave me freedom. It helped me to breathe. I got creative. I was making carnivore cheesecake, carnivore pizza. And
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
think that's what made such a big difference for me.
You made some things that were appetizing, maybe calorie dense, more
Yep.
butter, the
Yeah.
eggs, which have a lot of nutrients in them, but they're also easy to digest, easier just to
Mhm.
digest than steak. Um, I got you. Okay. So you made some more palatable foods than your typical, I'm eating a pound of hamburger today with a little butter on the
Right.
side and that's it. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Now I understand. So that's, that's interesting. That allowed you to start healing and putting the weight back on, but still continue to eliminate the things that were irritating. Uh,
Exactly. You can still do that mindfully. So I
right.
left out pork, left out chicken for the most part.
Mm,
I cut out dairy after the first 2 months because I had like, 8 pounds on me, and I was like, okay, I don't need to be as aggressive. And so there were some things that I was doing in the beginning that weren't optimal, but it was enough.
hmm
And I was making meat broth, which is very restorative to the gut, but I had histamine intolerance in the beginning, but I knew this is my medicine, I've got to take it. And after feeling everything that I have felt in my body after mast cell activation syndrome, you'll
Hmm.
react to pretty much anything.
Sure.
So I had that in mind. It was like, at least I'm giving my body what it needs. And I saw the signs. My energy and mood lifted in 2 weeks. I started feeling better. I started feeling stronger. I just became more resilient. So
Wow. That's
it wasn't
amazing.
perfect, but it's just about being mindful. And I
Hmm.
really do believe that everyone is bio individual. We all need something different.
Sure.
Um,
Have you worked in some organ meat now? I know that's that's a big thing
oh
with,
yeah.
okay.
I love organs,
Okay.
mostly for variety. I mean, I think it's great. They're so nutrient dense, but
Right.
Liver, I eat a hunk like the size of my thumbprint. Every day I just eat a raw frozen hunk of liver because it's so nutrient dense.
Great.
Um, but whereas something like beef tongue or beef heart, I just love it. It's delicious and it's great variety.
Gotcha. Wow. Excellent. So you found resources for these ways to get these to you,
Yeah.
these unusual. So it sounds like you're very geared towards beef or ruminant, I guess,
Yes.
animal sources rather than you said you eliminated chicken and pork. Do you mind going into why that's more uh, preferred, more
Yeah.
preferable?
So from what I've found, it's very hard to find a pig or a chicken that has not been fed soy.
Mm,
And that I am really, really stubborn about my hormones because if I was going to be putting on weight, I needed to optimize hormones because I wanted good body composition. I wanted to gain fat in the right places. And I know
mm,
too much about soy and what it does to our hormones, not to mention it's inflammatory.
right.
So that's the main reason. Another reason is because beef and lamb and bison, they're more rich in saturated fat, stearic acid,
Right.
which supports mitochondrial fusion. But polyunsaturated fat can be inflammatory.
Right.
Um, and I had that in mind as well.
Gotcha. Excellent. Yeah, I just saw a study on the benefits of stearic acid with
Yeah, it's
another
awesome.
NTP, and yeah, it really helps our mitochondria um, have more energy, basically burn fat more effectively and be more
Mhm.
put out more energy. They just work more effectively than with polyunsaturated fats, like you mentioned.
Right.
So, yeah, stearic acid is been vilified for so long
I know.
as like the saturated fat that's killing us, but it's actually what we're born with. It's the type of fat we're born with. Like 80-90% of the fat we have in our bodies when we're born
Right.
is 90. We keep, stearic acid, we keep replacing it with these polyunsaturated fats and throwing off that ratio. It's not surprising it's going to affect our health.
Right.
When we have more polyunsaturated fats stored in our body than we were meant to and have less stearic acid. So that's brilliant that you figured that out. So I was imagine that um, your desire to be well really spearheaded your desire for knowledge. Basically, you're studying,
Yes.
you're digging in and figuring out what worked and what didn't. Plus, you're experimenting. I mean, if if it worked on you, it's going to work on most people with all the things that you had going on. Um, not everyone's unique, but you have a really good place to start from when you've experienced healing in so many different areas.
Yeah.
So is that where you would say you just were digging in? It was kind of like as a need to live, you were digging into health information and
Yeah, I will say though, I have always had a passion for health
mm,
and holistic healing. I mean, when I was a kid, I would I would gather flowers from my mom's garden and make little healing tinctures, and it was just fun to me. I just thought it was this idea of healing from our food as medicine and
mm,
herbs as medicine, that God has provided everything that we need for healing.
mm,
I've always loved that. I also grew up, my older sister has epilepsy, and
mm,
my father had chronic pain, rheumatoid arthritis. So I grew up wanting to find a solution to make them okay. I bottled up my problems for a long time, and I decided I'm going to be the one to find a solution for not only my family but for sick people.
mm,
So from a very young age, I have always been passionate about that. And as I mentioned, I have um, relations in my family who are very versed in keto, and so I always took knowledge from there. And so when I got sick, it was like, okay, now it's time to put this to real practical use. And a light bulb
gotcha.
went off, and it's like, I know my stuff. I know this, and I just became certified. But
Okay.
honestly, everything that I've learned is mostly from troubleshooting
Sure.
for years. And I'm good at that. I'm really good at troubleshooting. And I do recognize that everyone is bio individual. but I also am good at recognizing the signs and decoding these signals that our bodies send, even when we're in this, state of fight or flight.
Mm,
So I have a better understanding of that for sure. But when
gotcha.
my life was on the line, it was like, okay, this is not a drill. This is for real.
Right.
Um, and I just had to use my critical thinking.
Mm. So now that you're at a more, I guess, a healthy body weight, you're lifting, I would imagine are you eating more meat, taking in more protein now? What does that look like for you?
Yes. Yeah. Currently I'm eating more protein than what I would recommend to most people. I am actually, so I've put on plenty of healthy body fat,
Okay.
and I would love to be shredded at least once before I turn 40. So I took upon this high protein experiment.
Okay.
Um, and it's basically Sean Baker's guide. Sean Baker is awesome.
Yeah.
He's also a carnivore.
Right.
And it's just high protein, low fat with fat refeeds to maintain my hormones. So I've been eating a lot of fish and turkey,
Mm.
usually around 250 grams of protein,
Oh,
and lower around 50 grams of fat. And I never thought I would be, I mean, I used to do a 4-to-1 fat to protein ratio.
right.
And I was always like, fat is the most important macronutrient, but I am a changed person. I mean, I just, everyone is in a different place. And right
Mhm.
now where I am, my body is loving it. My blood sugars never peak 85. My ketones are higher doing high protein than when I do high fat.
Interesting.
Um, so I am, it speaks to the level of insulin sensitivity that
Hmm.
I have now, because when you're 69 pounds, you don't have any muscle, and muscle equals insulin sensitivity, very much so. So
Gotcha.
there are a lot of things that play into it, but yeah, I eat a lot of protein. When I'm not doing that experiment, I I usually aim for around a gram of protein per pound of body weight. I know that that's usually a good range.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I would recommend to most people just starting, unless they have other factors to consider.
Gotcha. And do you find that sometimes women are a little more resistant to doing that than men? They kind of think of meat
Yes.
as like this, oh, I'm going to get bulky and turn into some, it's going to make them thicker. They think it's just somehow, or even just not palatable. Like a lot of them
Yeah,
just don't have a taste for.
that's the main problem, is the palatability.
Yeah.
But once you eat this way for a certain amount of time, your body finally picks up. It's like, I need this. And I usually notice that with my clients, is sometimes in the beginning, especially if you're coming from burning sugar as fuel, you're not going to want
Right.
it. You still want sugar. But once you cross over
Hmm.
into ketogenesis, and um, that sugar is no longer ruling you, you really do start to crave the right things. Intuition and cravings become much clearer. And sometimes, you know, sometimes women, especially around their cycle,
Mm.
can eat up to 3 pounds of meat like nothing. And I think it's really interesting. It's the hormones. Men don't have hormones like we do.
I'm aware.
And I'm sure you know, but that dictates hunger a lot. So,
Sure.
I mean, I know when it's a full moon, because I'm like ravenous. I'm like, man, I could eat 5 more steaks right now. And sure enough, it's like, oh, okay.
Gotcha.
But it used to freak me out, honestly. But yeah, I do find that in the beginning, women are scared of the idea of eating so much meat.
Mm.
There are a lot of concerns about, what about my kidneys? And
Right.
um, there are a lot of myths out there that need to be debunked, but the science is there, the data is there. You don't have to be afraid of saturated fat either.
Right.
And fat also it very much is essential. It's essential to heal the gut with animal fat. It's
Hmm.
essential to fuel our hormones. I'm sure cholesterol fuels our hormones. Um, but protein is so important too. It's got those amino acids. It's got tyrosine, which is, for me, I was a burnout on Adderall. My
Mm.
neurotransmitters were shot, and tyrosine is a precursor to dopamine. Um, And I
Gotcha.
mean, I felt it. My mood picked up very quickly.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Wow. So you would often start people now, as far as meal frequency, again, it's gonna vary depending on where people are coming in from, but what does yours look like now? Are you eating like 3 meals a day? Do you do some intermittent fasting? I mean, I know you had a weight issue, and so for you, it was
Yeah.
you've been focused on gaining weight over the last year and a half, not so much on a weight control. So, I mean, as far as maybe what you do and then what you might recommend to somebody who's maybe trying to lose 30, 40 pounds, I mean, how does that work into, I mean, I guess you could go either way with a carnivore diet, could you not?
Yeah, exactly. So I eat 1 meal per day.
Okay.
I was eating 2 meals per day during my healing.
Okay.
What
So
I
just
think is,
two during your healing, you would put that weight on.
oh yeah, I think what matters more is eating at a surplus. I have almost always done intermittent fasting.
Okay.
I experienced tremendous relief. I would have just fasted my way into healing, but I couldn't have afforded to lose more weight.
Right.
So I started eating 2 meals a day. The combination of eating enough with resistance training was enough to put on healthy weight. I think that people have this idea that, it's not hard to put on muscle. I mean, you do have to work hard, but
Mm,
that's relative. At the beginning, I was just doing body weight exercises. As long as you're eating enough and giving your body those tools
hmm
and then providing the stimulus, it should grow. Um, so I think that intermittent fasting is a great tool to
hmm
lose weight, but I think it can also be great for maintenance as long as you're eating enough. So for me, I can.
Oh, lost your, I lost your audio for a second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, there we
Yeah,
go. There we go.
sorry, I had a call.
Oh, okay. I've lost your, yeah, I couldn't hear you for a second. So you're saying
Sorry
that
about.
it'd be good for maintenance because you eat adequate calories. Is that what you're saying? You make sure you just eat enough for that
Right,
meal or two.
right. Yeah. So it's easy for me to sit down and eat enough. 2,500. I'm maintaining around 2,200 calories right now.
Mm,
Um, and I can do that over the span of 3 hours, no problem. But for some people, it's hard to break up. And that's why 1 meal a day can help to lose weight because it's generally hard to eat, larger portions in one sitting. But for anyone trying to lose weight, overall, it requires some sort of energy deficit.
sure.
So I think that reverse dieting is actually a really cool tool that you can use where you're actually eating more calories, but you're feeling better. So you're burning more calories, and that will put you in an energy deficit. I don't
Mm,
like the idea of cutting calories or even counting calories
hmm
because you can only go so low.
Right.
And your hormones and your internal organs even start to down regulate,
hmm
kind of like putting your phone on airplane mode. If you're eating low calorie, that's what happens to your organs. They're not going to be functioning optimally. But a way to lose weight that will stay off without starving yourself
hmm
is to fuel yourself properly and to go out there and move your butt a little bit. Just get into an energy deficit somehow.
Gotcha.
um, but sometimes, if someone has a lot of body fat to lose, it also depends on how much body fat you have. You can only burn 30 calories for each pound of body fat that you have. Um, so for me, I don't do extended fasting anymore. I'll do probably no more than 48 hours.
Mm,
Um, and then I know that I'm at risk of tapping into my own lean muscle.
right. Gotcha.
Uh, so, anyways,
Interesting. So sometimes I would think when you're eating 1 or 2 meals a day and you're eating carnivorously, um, you don't have the sugar stimulating insulin, you don't have the sugar stimulating hunger hormones. So there's more satiety involved. So you think there's probably some level of natural, um, like a calorie deficit that just sort of presents itself because the person's not hungry. In other words,
yes, definitely.
you're not force feeding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's so beautiful is a lot of people who have done so many different diets, they've had to count calories, but with carnivore and eating only animal products, it restores leptin sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
And once that happens, it's almost impossible to overeat. It's a very clear signal. I mean, I know that I know when I'm done. And I've suffered with binge eating. And it's just so refreshing to just have this clear signal. Even when I have food left on my plate, it's like, no, I'm done. I'm going to save this. So that's what's so beautiful, is for people that are used to counting calories, they can just trust, eat to satiety. And when your body has healed and when your hormones are functioning properly, you can just trust those signals.
Gotcha. So you've been obviously working with people. Who are most of your clients? I mean, are they dealing with an autoimmune issue, or is it weight loss, or do you have I'm sure some combination?
A lot of autoimmune,
Mm,
and a lot of thyroid, to be honest. I would say maybe a third of it is people with thyroid issues.
gotcha.
And I've had a couple of clients who are simply looking for body composition changes. And so I have different options that work best for some people. So with someone with thyroid issues, it makes more sense to work together for 6 months. With
Mm,
someone that's just looking to lose some body fat and they're familiar with the mechanisms behind keto and carnivore, we could do a 1 hour consultation and set them on their way, and then we'll touch base in a month.
gotcha.
Um, I work with people with mood disorders as well, or who have been through trauma. I'm also a life coach. So that is really what I learned a lot with my certification, was how to ask the right questions
Mm,
to support people to come to their own conclusions. Um, so that's been really cool, is to help people find their truth.
mm, wow. Which could be, so sometimes those emotional or life issues are driving maybe disordered eating, or some
Yes.
sort of compulsory eating, or just bad decisions because they're just making just comfort eating,
Right.
that kind of, like many of us this year, where we just kind of, you're in a situation where it's just like you got nothing else to do but eat,
Right.
and it's not for the right reason. So I can see those definitely work well together by uh, dealing with the emotional, or the just the personal side of whatever's going on in their life, that they don't take
Behavioral.
behavioral issues. They don't take it out on their diet. They don't take it out on their own body.
Right.
Right. Wow. So, and then with thyroid, I mean, I know there's just one thing that came to mind, is a lot of people, there's a fear. There's a fear that if you're eating only 1 or 2 meals a day, or if you're eating very low carb or keto or carnivorous, that your thyroid levels can drop. And yet what sounds like what you're finding is you're talking about Hashimoto's and people with very, very low thyroid, difficult, uh,
Yeah.
difficult to treat in any setting, but you're
Yeah.
finding benefit to with the carnivore diet and eating so low carb with low thyroid.
Definitely. Absolutely. So most often the reason that T3
Mm-hmm.
thyroid drops with low carb or keto is, one, if anyone's losing weight, your hormones are going to drop. That's
Sure.
normal. But also, when we're in ketosis, our thyroid hormone, or our thyroid, becomes more efficient. So we don't have to produce as much thyroid hormone.
Mm,
Um, Sort of the same thing with vitamin C. When we stop eating glucose, vitamin C and glucose, they are antagonists of each other. They compete for the same pathway. So when you remove the glucose, you should not need as much vitamin C.
right.
Um, so for thyroid, it's becoming more efficient in most cases. Now, if someone is dealing with actual symptoms and they're feeling sluggish, then we'll look into that. Maybe they're under eating. Maybe
Mm,
they're so satiated that they're not eating enough, which can definitely affect your thyroid.
gotcha.
Maybe it's too stressful, which can work against you. But I am finding a lot of success with, I mean, everyone that I've worked with as far as thyroid goes, as long as you're eating enough and it's about identifying a way of eating that works best for you and
Mm,
not triggering your immune system. And there are other things that also play a role. I'm really into biohacking.
Hmm.
One of my favorites is cold therapy, and that has shown to increase thyroid hormone.
Hmm.
So that's a really cool thing that people can look into. It's free. Um, there are lots of free biohacking things that I think
Sure.
anyone could look into and benefit from.
Gotcha. Well, what would you say, if you could give us some kind of some first steps or basic steps? I mean, what are some general recommendations you would say for someone who's maybe wanting to experiment with this kind of diet, or and see how it affects what they're struggling with, whether it's weight loss or just some digestive inflammatory problems? Um, where would you say give someone like a, here, try this for a week or two and see how it does for you? What would that look like?
I would say eat the meat that you enjoy and can afford, and cut out the processed oils and sugar and added sugar. Cut out everything else. Just focus on the animal kingdom. Anything
Yes.
from the animal kingdom. Don't be dogmatic with it, and see how it goes. And I would say, set up a good support system for yourself,
Mm,
and maybe ask yourself, what's your why? Why are you trying this? Obviously, if you're if you're going to give it a chance, only meat, it's going to be for some significant reason,
mm,
usually so that we can be free of something to live our lives and show up for other people and be our best versions of ourselves. So that can really help you stick to it
mm,
and do it in a way that is sustainable. So if, again, with the whole restrictive mindset, it works against you,
mm.
and it's not, I don't even think it's worth doing if it's not sustainable.
Sure.
um so
Sure.
yeah.
So maybe they don't have to disrupt their meal pattern too much, but maybe have, if they're used to eating 3 meals or more, maybe just, do a breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Yeah.
eat to
Yeah.
satiety kind of thing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and don't ignore those hunger signals. For some time I was eating butter first thing in the morning, before bed, and in the middle of the night, just to get my body out of fight or flight mode, to send that signal you're in a supported place. So I would say don't ignore hunger. Even if it's freaking you out, your body is hungry for real nutrients.
Interesting. Wow. That's great. That's great. So as long as they're no going for the right thing, they're going for the nutrients that are going to give, um, supply what they need. Obviously,
Right.
we're not going for the ice cream in the middle of the night. We're going for the butter.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what a lot of people wouldn't think is such a great nutrient, but the butyrate, the fatty
Yeah.
acids in butter are fantastic for the brain, for their medium chain, so they're easily broken down into energy. Um, that's a great source of energy. So that's part of like your you mentioned your fat refeeds.
Yeah.
You'd have your protein in your main meal over 2 or 3 hours, but then you'd have, if you felt the need, if you felt the hunger signals, you were
Yep.
going for a fat snack,
Butter.
essentially.
It's almost always, I mean, the fattiest meats that I have. So it's going to be fatty lamb. And then I'll just sit down literally with a frozen stick of butter and eat it like a popsicle. And I can eat the entire thing like nothing. And it's so cool because I don't gain weight. Like I
Right.
feel fine. I know, but I wait for that signal. It's not like I'm like, because I'm eating to satiety, even with lower fat. I'm not starving myself. Um, and so that signal is very clear. It's usually about every 7 to 14 days where it's like, oh, okay, it's time. And I feel great.
Okay, so that's not a daily thing or even every 2 days. It's like once every other week or once a week, maybe.
Yep. Yep. Usually once a week. Um, and yeah, I'll have lots of egg yolks. I'll usually get like 18 eggs, and I'll make carnivore brownies with the egg yolks, and some beef suet. So they're just high in stearic acid and choline from the egg yolks. And it's just a fun time of eating a bunch.
But that
But
does
yeah,
feel good. Yeah,
there's
that's
no bloat, there's no guilt.
there's no guilt. That's a serotonin though going off. The hormones are like
Definitely.
happy. Yeah, that would make some
Definitely.
happy hormones. I mean,
Yeah.
not just testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, but the
Serotonin.
yeah, the serotonin, all the
Yep.
neurotransmitters. The
GABA.
leptin's probably going, hey, we're
Yeah, pretty
but
much.
but uh but that's amazing. And glucagon's like, hey, we're cruising here.
Yeah.
Everything's happy. So that relationship between insulin and glucagon is really healed.
Yes. And I never thought that would heal. I mean, I dealt with hypoglycemia for years. It was scary. I was hiding it from people because I knew they would just be like, you need to go to the hospital or eat a diabetic diet.
Mm,
But I mean, my blood sugar would be in the 30s almost every evening after I ate dinner. I would go and hide in an office room in my house and do yoga because I felt like I was gonna die. It was so long I dealt with that, but yeah, that has clearly restored, and that's amazing news in itself. I never thought that would come back. It was scary.
that's amazing. Yeah. Wow. Excellent. Well, how can people reach out to you? Because you're helping people. Obviously, you're coaching people, and and people are going to want to get a hold of you to help them and walk them through this, like you have. What's what's your website? I'm going to put it in the show notes. But what is that?
Great. Well, my website is I don't have like a custom domain.
Okay.
It's just RC Farmer. But I would say to find me at Instagram. That's where everything is linked, and that is going to be Tailored Keto Health. Um, Not because my name is Taylor, but hopefully most people get it.
Right.
Um,
Tailored for you, basically.
that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's brilliant. Tailored Keto Health on Instagram. And looks like you're on LinkedIn and Facebook as well with that, and Parlor.
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rebekah. I appreciate you taking time to come on and share your story. Like I said, I had no idea. I had some idea, I should say, but I didn't know the idea of the depth of your story and all that you had been dealing with, and where that went. So thank you for
Thank you
sharing that.
so much. Thank you
I mean,
for everything that you do. You have an awesome show, and it's seriously an honor to be here.
well, thank you. I'm blushing. No, I appreciate that. No, I mean, it's because of people like you who come on and share their stories, because people connect and people
Yeah.
identify. And that's what this is. It's not about being a superhero. It's about being real and saying, hey, we've all
Yes.
have things we deal with, and we're searching. We're all none of us have it all figured out, but we're all searching. And there is not one answer for everybody, but
Right.
there are answers.
Right.
And so we've got to come together. We've got a grassroots movement of people sharing their struggles, what they found, help them, because we know that the existing health authorities and the existing health
Yeah.
guidelines are incredibly flawed and are driven by greed and industry and politics, and are
Yep.
not going to give us answers we need. So it's
Yep.
people like you sharing it, your story and what you found that healed you, that is going to help us all find what we need to go where we need to go. And so I appreciate that you've taken your experience and you are now helping other people, because there's nothing, having been in fitness and nutrition for 20 years, you're not chasing the dollar. I can tell you that right now.
Exactly.
Your heart is to help people. And
Amen.
yeah,
And yeah, I
yeah,
know what it's like to feel hopeless and to be told that there is no answer. And I know that people need to hear that there is hope and you're not alone.
right.
People need to hear that. So,
They do.
yeah.
They do. Awesome, Rebekah. Well, I'll make sure your links are in the show notes, but I mean, look for you on Instagram. I know you're active, very active there, and you're doing a lot more podcasts. So when you get something if you feel like is there something that works for you, like a podcast or a YouTube channel or something where you're a little more like hosting it?
Possibly. I would love to do a podcast someday. Right now, I'm working on a book. So
Oh,
that's where my extra time goes.
I understand.
But podcast would be fun someday.
Well, awesome. When you get the book going and published, get back to me and we'll have you back on to talk about the book and
Thank you. That would be
promote it as
awesome.
well.
Thank
Great.
you so much.
Thanks, Rebekah. Have a
All right.
great week.
You too.